So we start to look in Chapter 12 at how we can measure and manage the delivery of service. Easier said than done, quite frankly, but it's something that we constantly try to monitor. So we'll take a look at, slide this down, so we'll take a look at techniques and method. You can look at the example in the book of Rusty Pelican because it's a 9-page document, but it's a really good example of how you avoid failure by looking at the service delivery and the service standards. And while many of the places I've worked may not have had 9-page documents, they've had lengthy documents on service standards and how it's supposed to work, as I'm sure many of you listening to this have worked in service in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a hotel, restaurant, or whatever it is. You've had those same standards. So how do we measure it? Look at those first two things, planning and training. You've heard me probably say before, and you'll definitely hear me say it again, all the planning in the world doesn't matter if we're not properly training our employees. So our goal of what we're trying to achieve through this service means nothing if they were never trained how to do it. You take a look inside and say, oh, I'm so upset that this person at the front desk didn't know how to do this. Why didn't they know how to do it? And then you look at rewards for guests and employees. Look, when we do things right, we reward them, and they continue to do things right again. And they understand that the standard is set there. And looking at this chapter, you can see there are tons of different ways to measure it. You can use one, combinations of one gigantic one. The point is to look at its overall effectiveness and how we want that to go. Job performance standards, kind of going back to what I was just talking about. What is the expectation that we're setting for the employees? Okay, and what they're expected to do. They talk about Emeril's Restaurant, salt and pepper shakers, good example. But just how does that work? And is it being, again, referring back to training, is it being set up clearly? Management by walking around. My restaurant experience, my hospitality experience in general, for lack of a better word, your behind better be on the floor if you're a manager, or the front if you're a manager, so that you know what's going on. Because it's impossible for you to understand what's going on if you're not out there seeing what's happening. Does it mean you're going to catch everything? Of course not. But it gives you the basis to kind of sit there and say, okay, now I understand. I'm observing what's happening. Look, when it's busy, how long does it take to do something? What's happening to the people who are waiting to check in, to wait on a table, to get a drink at the bar, to whatever it's going to be? And the argument for most people would say about that the book talks about is pretty simple. It's, well, if I know you're out there and you're watching me, I'm going to do it right. So if I see you out there, I go, oh my God, and I start doing things the way that I think you should want them done. And that may be true, but as I said, you'll never know unless you get out there and see it happening. And, it's pretty easy if you've done it, even if you weren't a manager, if you were a server, or you're someone who worked the front desk, you can see when something's wrong on a guest's face. What does that tell you? How do I react? What do we do when we see that look? What is our next step? So, again, you saw these examples, and there are many of them in this chapter, about service guarantees. And I don't say that lightly. I don't take it lightly. I think it's something that's very good that can help you improve upon service. When you say, look, we basically think that we do this perfect, and if we don't, here's what we're going to do for you. You set a very high standard for service excellence that way, and you, again, train your employees with the job specifications they need to make sure that they understand that that is the way that the job is done. The service is going to be delivered to the customer in whatever format it is. So that becomes very critical for you to understand that. And, if you're going to offer something like that, you better be able to back it up. Mistakes will be made, but it'll also help you improve upon service. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement for you to say, we guarantee our service. And you kind of feel like in this day and age, you should, but it's not always the case. Like we said, when we're talking about that, if you focus on the customer, then it should be easier for you to foresee or meet the demands of what they want to do. You can also find out where you messed up. If it's a guarantee and you end up having to pay for a night's stay in a hotel room and they say, well, the reason was because we showed up and nobody was at the front desk. And we waited and we waited and we waited, and 5 minutes later somebody finally came out from the back. Okay, well, now we know where service failed. And it helps us fix it so it doesn't happen again. As I said, that is a very strong message. The disadvantages are listed in the book. There are many of them, just like there are many advantages. Again, is your guarantee realistic? Is it something that you have trained your employees to meet? Is there an issue in training that it can't be met? Is it that, that realism part of it becomes critical when you're like, well, we said that and we can't do it. So we just keep giving away free room nights or free food or whatever it's going to be. So we have to make sure that's right. So when you're doing it, like they talk about, it's unconditional, it's transparent. We're not trying to put a little note at the bottom that's in a font so small that nobody can read. They can say, yeah, we offer a free room, but it has to be this, this, and this. So that goes back to that credibility. Looking at the key features of service. And what is the compensation to the customer? We don't want to get a free room night. We don't want to get a free meal. We want the service we expect. Okay, you could look at me right now and say, oh, there's a couple people that probably do. And maybe you're right. The majority of customers don't. They just want to be able to check in, go to bed, get up, go to work the next day, into town, visit a destination, etc., or, one night a week, one night a month, we get to go out and have dinner. And this happens. It's not what we wanted. So what's the compensation? And we say significant. I mean, again, if it's not significant, what do you have? You have a guest who doesn't return. And therefore, you're losing that guest. And again, just like employees, guests, we lose them. It's hard to get them back. And it's very expensive to get them back. And sometimes you just can't. So that's another thing you have to look out for. Like I said, is there no little thing at the bottom? And how do we do it? Free room night. Well, we have to go through A, B, C, and D and fill out all these forms. Free food. Well, you have to go mail this in. They're not going to do it. So how easily can we implement this good service guarantee to our guest? That's very, very critical. Okay? If they have to do it, they do it. Here's all you do when you're done. And it's free. It's on us. It's our fault. How do we improve? When we were doing surveys, and we really want to find out, first of all, look, here's the basic thing. If you don't want to know, don't ask. An informal query by the employee, it's pretty simple. It's, how'd it go? How was everything? How'd we do? How was your service? Blah, blah, blah. Formal gets a little bit more, can mean anything from someone, like a table visit, someone walking by and having a conversation, a manager. Someone saying, would you mind filling this out? An actual professional sit-down interview where we ask you, hey, you stayed at our hotel October 30th, 2018. Tell me about it. Tell me exactly what happened from the moment you pulled up until the moment you left. So, in any of those cases, what do we want to know? What is the key thing that we want to know? We don't want to be bombarded by 1,000 things. So, the thing that we talk about in this whole chapter with service is better to catch it while it's happening than after someone's gone, because it's very hard to make that up once they've left, and that, for lack of a better word, taste is in their mouth. But some ways to do it. Comment cards. So I worked at a restaurant, and we were very, very big on comment cards. We had a very high retention rate for comment cards, and comment cards are great. They give you snapshots. There's things in the book that tell you the content and the format of how they should be, and leaving space for comments. the issues, just like anything else you have, is sometimes they're only filled out when it's really good. Sometimes they're only filled out when it's really bad. And, what are you going to get when you take those two things together? You're going to get an average stay or an average visit or whatever it's going to be. Toll-free 800 numbers. Some people will do that. If they take the time to do that, they're going to let you know, possibly in the same format I just talked about with comment cards. The technology that's out there now that exists for feedback, it's pretty incredible. It's touchscreen pads. It's go to one of our social media sites and follow us, and we have a questionnaire there, which kind of bleeds into that next thing about focus groups. Some of you may have been in a focus group or not. I've moderated a few focus groups, and they're fascinating, but they're expensive, they're time consuming, there's gonna be some expectation of rewards. But when you get people in a room and you have the right panelists asking the right questions for feedback, you're gonna get feedback. And sometimes it may be feedback you don't want, sometimes it may be feedback you don't expect, but you're going to get it. There's an example of a hotel chain on environmental policies in the book that's a pretty good example. Customers, like we said, evaluating service on their own happens quite a bit. Mystery shoppers is something that throughout my career I've always dealt with. And you could argue that, if you don't know, how do you control? And of course, management's argument would be, well, if you're doing things right every single time, everybody's a mystery shopper and it doesn't matter. It's a great incentive for somebody to come in and get reimbursed for their meal and fill out this, and sometimes very lengthy report of how service was. But you're going to get an honest assessment. If your president of your company comes in, or your, general manager of your hotel walks in the front door, you're going to treat them differently because you know who they are. So that experience becomes tempered a little bit. So that helps with mystery shoppers. I worked for a chain restaurant many, many years ago where the only way we knew was at the end was when somebody paid. They paid with a credit card that was from one of our chains, and that automatically came with the survey. And if you hadn't been out there visiting the floor, the first question on the survey was, did you see the manager during your stay? Then you were like, oh, you know what? Because you're already in trouble because it was the first question on there. So for us, a lot of it was assume that every person that's paying is from another concept that you don't know. And servers, assume that everyone that's in here works for somebody else. I was located near the home office, and actually that was the case probably on every shift. Someone came in from another concept and ate, so it was pretty simple from that concept. Everybody was a mystery shopper. How we conduct surveys, all those different methods there, depends on what's successful for you and what your customers are going to fill out. And you may look at some of those as dated, like the mail, web, or telephone, critical incidents. Service quality, we talk about reliability, responsiveness, assurance, empathy, and tangibles. Good ways to measure quality of service and to go back and look and see, how important are those things to the customers? Because what I think is important to you may not be what you as a customer think is important to you. And if we have a disconnect there, we have a serious problem. Critical incidents, they stink, but we learn the service quality thing that comes out of those critical incidents, and we learn how not to do that again. Your guests are your best evaluators. You understand that. You hear improvement cycle and continuous improvement. You go, oh, God, do I have to hear this again? This sounds really cheesy. But the problem is it works. And you are always looking for ways to improve. And if you think that you've got it figured out and you don't have to worry about it ever again, then you're doomed to fail. Constantly figuring out things. Hey, we could do this faster. Hey, we could do this better. Or, hey, I was thinking that this might be a way for when guests check in that could save 20 seconds. That's a lot when someone's checking in after a long day and a flight that was delayed. So constantly looking at ways to improve it. Or can we get the food out a little bit faster this way? Or can we get drinks out to the poolside bar a little bit quicker? All these things that we look at, continuously improving on service to get it the best that it possibly can be. Always go back and think about things you had from a service standpoint that were great and things that weren't. How do we improve upon that? It is the constant battle we fight every single day.